This is a different world. That you still live in not you, but everybody that dives a BC in any shape or form is still in a world where any sort of depth change is taken into account by anticipation. And in CCR, this is even worse because your anticipation level needs to be there all the time. When you change
Yeah.
depth, you think about it. When you transition to a world that you don't think about it anymore, life is different.
Off Gassing, a scuba podcast with host Nick Hogel. Bringing change into a world anchored to its beliefs and philosophies is never an easy task. At one point, diving anything other than air was considered dangerous. J-valves without SPGs were common. Dive tables were the standard in diving. Needless to say, innovation is always waiting on the surface, ready to be greeted, much like a warm cup of tea between dives. In this episode, I sit down with Aviad Cahana, inventor of the Avelo Dive System. Please enjoy. Aviad, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fantastically. How are you doing?
I am doing pretty well. We were just kind of chatting about the coffee, my coffee addiction. So I am just drinking a little bit of water right now, but I did have a couple cups of instant coffee. So kind of ready to get this day started. Very excited to have you on the podcast. So thank you very much for joining. I know you're on a very busy schedule, and you're currently actually in KL, Kuala Lumpur for my listeners. I call it KL. What do you call it? KL, Kuala Lumpur?
KL, got used to
KL.
it.
But you're kind of in the midst of traveling, so thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast. But I guess just before we kind of get started, so you were just kind of telling me you've been on the move for quite a while. Where is your next destination?
Next destination is the Philippines after a long tour, and then back to the US, and probably back here very shortly.
Okay. And where in the U.S. are you based?
I am based in Golden, Colorado now,
Oh.
after years of being in Maui.
What brought you to Colorado from Maui? That's quite well, I guess islands to mountain, but what brought you to Colorado?
Turns out that running a company that is really changing how scuba is done is more easily done from a centralized location like Colorado than the middle of the ocean as Maui. But in my heart, I live in Maui.
Okay. I could I could only imagine. So I lived in Colorado for, let's see, I moved there in 2001, and then I ended up moving out. So a little over 10 years I lived in Colorado. I was in the mountains though. I lived in started in Vail, ended up in Breckenridge, and then even smaller town. The last few years I lived there was a town called Alma, Colorado. I don't know if you're familiar with Alma or Fairplay, but beautiful country up there. I actually miss Colorado. Don't miss the cold weather though. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, yeah. Totally explain why you're in Penang.
Yeah. Well, how was the transition for you going from? I'm assuming it's fairly nice tropical weather in Hawaii now. Golden, you got your four seasons. How was that transition for you?
So I didn't have much of a transition. I traveled all the time, even when I was in Maui. The difference is in Maui, the system and everything was invented and developed on Maui. The tanks, the hydro tanks, are actually manufactured in Golden, Colorado by a company called Steelhead. And being that the tank is one of the major components of the whole system, it was easier to be next to them. But I traveled heavily over the last, I would say, 2.5 years for this. And so while I transitioned physically, it was more the family, kids and wife that said, you know what? We've done the ocean thing. It's time to do the ski thing because we can always do the ocean thing. And it was more a better base for them. Whereas for me, I'm on the road all the time. So whether I'm, based on Maui or based in Colorado, I'm based off of an airplane usually.
Oh, okay. I so that's not a. I feel like there could be worse transitions, right? Going from the ocean to the mountains. Like the mountains have a place in my heart. I was uh, uh I hate to say the word ski bum because I was a snowboarder. I snowboarded quite a bit, so I was a border bum. Maybe we'll call. I don't know if that's the correct term, but no, I really really enjoyed my time up there. But I feel like as the older I got, I was like I just can't do the cold anymore. I remember the last winter I had in Colorado. There was a day. And I'm talking Fahrenheit here for all my international listeners, but there was a day where the high for the day was -4. That was the high for the day. And this is up in Alma, Colorado. It's actually the highest incorporated town in North America. And yeah, I was like, I can't. I mean, you go outside and you just breathe and your nose just hurts because it's so cold. I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. I
um,
mountain bike. I used to race mountain biking.
oh,
So
okay.
in the summer, Colorado is great. Comes about November, the summer in Colorado is best spent in Bonaire, Key Largo, and but no, I'm joking. I'm joking. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful mountain. It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
beautiful. And
No, 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 for sure. And you're gonna have to correct me because I know. So you're the creator of Avelo. So when you're speaking about the tanks just a little bit earlier, we're speaking about the Avelo system, which we will get into in a couple of minutes or a few minutes. But first, I wanted to ask you before I kind of steered away from my regular first question that I always ask. But the first question I always like to ask is, tell me how and why you became a scuba diver. Tell me about that first breath underwater. What led you to that moment? Was it absolutely wonderful? Was it I absolutely hate this? Was it this is okay? I think I could do a little bit more. Tell me about how you became introduced into the world of scuba diving.
I grew up next to the Mediterranean and was there a lot. And I got into scuba in my teens in the Red Sea. Uh, I believe it was a girlfriend that finally said, "Hey, let's go scuba." That was the final thing, but I don't remember exactly how it went. It was always on the like, obviously it will happen one day because it's a water sport like any other water sport, being so close to the ocean. But again, when you're a water person and you open water swimmer and all that, it was a natural thing. It just was a little push to let's go do this. And from that first moment on the water, it was like, oh, I'd like to do that.
No, that's actually a great way to put it because you being around the water, I felt like I was around the water quite a bit growing up as well. I started scuba diving a little bit later in life, but if somebody were to ask me like, "Oh, do you remember the first time you went swimming?" I couldn't recall that at all. Or the first time I rode a bike, I just couldn't because, like you said, it's just a natural progression of things that you're doing. So that's actually a very eloquent way to put it because I to be honest, I couldn't even imagine the first time I've been in water, right? It just seems so natural, like you've kind of always been around it. So you started in the Red Sea. Do you kind of remember what the diving was like? Did you do a lot more diving after taking those first breaths underwater?
Yeah, pretty quickly I went to the dive master route, and at the time it was a Siemens and Bizak environment, so more of a club, grow in a club like you learn from your mentors. It was more of a mentorship. But the dive shop was very much so. This is 97, 98 when I started to teach. But very quickly after that, like it was a dive master, spent a year as a dive master running trips in the Red Sea before transitioning to instructor. Again, that was common at the time that you're doing a long internship as a dive master and become a skillful dive master in managing groups before you even think about teaching, and then went into teaching and advanced to the ranks of the dive shop. But it was pretty quickly at the time, pretty quickly, like within 2 years, I was already running teams of
Yeah, yeah.
trainers.
One question I always like to ask is because me saying I think a lot of people have that transition going from okay, this is fun diving, this is just for me. Now I'm in charge of groups of people. How was that transition? Was it something that you took to very easily? Did you like it? Was it something that you kind of gravitated towards?
Yeah, I think at the end of the advanced open water, the dive shop, I think it was the dive shop manager at the time, approached me and said, "Look, it looks like you're natural at like understanding ahead what's going on and even helping the instructor organize the group. So we keep things on time. And I think that was like a spark that said, oh, let's, sure, let's do Dive Master, would be fun. And the Red Sea was an unbelievable diving experience. I think it still is, but it was great. I mean, it's a swimming pool. It's a clear visibility swimming pool with a ton of corals and colors and wildlife and all that. So, it was hard to say no.
Yeah, for sure. So it's actually a place that I have not been to yet, and obviously, as divers, the bucket list just keeps growing ever and ever long. Like it never gets shorter. I feel like, yeah, since I started diving, it's just, I mean, I can't even fathom how long it is right now. But the Red Sea is definitely a place that I need to get to. I mean, just anytime I see footage from it or people talking about it, it's one of those places that has been on the list for probably the one of the earliest ones on the list. So one of these days I'll have to make it out there and actually check it out because yeah, I still hear that it's absolutely phenomenal out there.
Highly recommended, and it still is.
Yeah. So what from there did you how did you end up in Hawaii?
So I went and traveled around the world as a scuba instructor. What did you call it before you were a snowboard?
Oh,
Um,
oh,
yeah, I was that.
snowboard, yeah, border bum or ski
Yeah,
bum. So what we call underwater bum. There we go.
yeah. So I was a traveling scuba instructor bum. Not quite. I did a big bicycle trip around the world, and every time I ran out of money, I made money by being an instructor because at the time I could teach any specialty, including what was the more technical diving. So when I showed up at a dive shop, I was versatile. I could do anything that they needed and had some unique specialties at the time. So if I would stop in, Southeast Asia, I did all the way from Mongolia through China, Southeast Asia, and then ended up with to boot 4 months in New Zealand. I just
Oh
flew the
wow.
bike there, but
Okay.
it was a long bicycle trip, and so got to experience a lot of that area. And I met my wife, who's from a small town in Ohio. Yes, and she happened to teach English as a second language. We met. We came back to the Red Sea, and at some point she goes, "Look, you're a natural engineer. What are we doing here? Why are we here?" And I said, well, that will be a cool. Like I've done the scuba. You know how you get in your scuba career to a point that you're not done, but you're kind of plateaus,
Yeah.
and you think there's everything there is to know too about scuba, especially if you go the technical route. And that was cool. So I got into a very good school. It's essentially the equivalent of MIT in Israel. It's called the Technion. It's the Israel Institute of Technology. And I got into that for a degree in environmental engineering and chemical engineering. And when you study chemical engineering, you go into thermodynamics in ways that are not really are far from what is explained in scuba, even at the technical level, typically.
Yeah.
And that's where I really learned about gas behavior, thermodynamics, all the things that we take for granted. That's you really learn it. And then I got out from there. I happened to not dive for a while. I got into a career. I was hired in by a company that was based in Boulder, Colorado, funny enough. But I worked out of New Mexico. Became a more of an environmental chemical engineer. Worked on that, worked with refineries, did a lot of different gases, not only breathing gases, and other stuff. Transitioned from there to open a company that did renewable chemicals, which I still own. That company moved to Los Angeles, where it is today, and it's converting waste, agricultural waste, and other waste to renewable chemicals. And we decided to move to Maui because of a change of environment. And the kids were very, very young. They were like, you know, toddlers. And it was great. Like Maui would be a great place to, let's see how it works. And Avelo was born when I got back into scuba after not diving for almost 10 years, anecdotally, or teaching a class here for funsies. But I essentially got out of the scuba industry, got back, but I was armed with different knowledge at this point.
I before I ask, more about the Avelo, I have to ask. So you went biking around the world. So is biking a big passion of yours? Like, so you and can you tell me just a little bit? Like, so when you say bike around the world, like, what do you? Can you elaborate on that? Like, you started somewhere, or was it like you were bringing your bike to places, or did you actually ride from point A to B to C? Can you just tell me a little bit more about that journey?
This will take some time.
That's okay. We got time. We got
Oops,
time.
sorry.
All good.
Here's how it went. I went from Mongolia, from Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia, and I started like the backpackers, the typical backpacker. And I biked and raced before that, mountain bikes. And I was like, whoa, Mongolia is just an unbelievable country for mountain biking because it essentially looks like the US, except 300, 400 years ago. Outside
Yeah.
of the main city, it's completely undeveloped, but it has those yak trails that are single tracks that it feels like what Colorado is trying to do, except if you didn't have all the roads and you have complete, freedom to go develop mountain bike trails. And for somebody who mountain bikes a lot, especially in those days, it was like, dude, this is like this is what mountain biking tourism should be.
Yeah.
So I got a mountain bike from China that was a hardtail, you know, it was top of the line for the time. And I went on a couple trips. I got hooked up with a guy that had a hostel in, like a backpacker hostel in Ulaanbaatar, the main city. And he saw my bike and he goes, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "Man, this is the best. All I do is I'm trying to find a cook and a guide for just somebody that speaks the language for, and I'm going to put an expedition because renting a car is peanuts. You're driving like sometimes 12, 13 hours, and then there's areas that will be world class for mountain biking. I just need somebody that will go with me." And he goes, "If you'll develop the mountain bike trails for me, I will fund every expedition. Go do expeditions all over Mongolia. Come back with a track, a trail, a plan. You know, find out. Let the cook make sure that the cook knows where to get all of the supplies. Make sure that the driver knows how to get you there and out of there. If you can teach the driver how to be a technician for a bike, so that way you never run into an issue. If you make me the plan, I will sell it to European groups. Go forth and conquer."
Oh
And I'm
wow.
like, that will be fantastic for so 3, almost 4 months. Yeah, so for 4 months, I had a little team with me, and we developed 12, 5 nights, 6 days, saying, now that's from scuba. If you worked in scuba, you can see the analogies very quickly if you
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
develop new. So it was a bit of scuba on a bike. That's how it started. Then I got enough confidence to like do multi-day, bicycle trips. So from then, I took the bike on a train to Beijing, got it tuned up and kitted up for a longer trip, and then started from Beijing and went around sort of a circumference of all of China. And that was biking. That was not traveling with a bike, that was biking. Went all the way from Beijing to the Taklamakan Desert, through northern China and inner Mongolia, up to Tibet, which was done in retrospect unknowingly, because you're going through a yak trail, so you don't know that you're crossing borders necessarily. And it's all single track. This is all off road, single tracks, always, outside the main roads. Incredible experiences. And then from there to Chengdu, down to Kunming, that's where I met my wife. She decided to buy a bike. She joined me. We did Laos, Thailand, and then she had to go. We biked together for 2 months. She had to go back and finish her contract. She was teaching English. I did the rest of Southeast Asia for a few more months, and then again, every time I needed money, I stopped. Turns out at the time that with 2, 3 weeks of working, it gives you like 2, 3 months of of work. So it wasn't a lot of scuba.
Yeah.
And then New Zealand for 4 months.
Oh wow! So prior to meeting your wife, were most of these trips, and then after the technician, or Mongolia trip, were most of these trips solo, or did you have like a team of, or like other people just all solo?
The rest of the trip was solo because you get the experience. Now China was a lot more. In China, you didn't need anything, as you can imagine. They have all those truck stops and pit stops. So the yak trails always follow the main road too, because they're ancient and they're paved. Like yak trails are the best thing for a mountain biker because they kind of pave the roads for you. So even on a loaded bike, you can go. And then when you want to go, like, you just stop in a small village, and they all look at you at the time like crazy. because it wasn't developed. So you just you put your bags, the bike pack bags down, and you go mountain biking for real around the area, and you're alone completely.
Oh wow, man! I don't know if anybody has. I mean, I'm sure you've been told, but you need to write a book about this. That would be no. Honestly, though, I mean, that's such an amazing journey because the whole travel aspect. So I was always very drawn to the solo travel, right? The solo backpacking, but obviously when you're backpacking you're going to public places, you're meeting other people, but the journey that you went on, I mean, essentially you're going to places where nobody's been. Well, I mean, obviously some people, but it's a very small amount of people that will go to these places. And then especially that must have been such an amazing experience. Wow, I'm like in awe right now. Like,
Well,
that's
especially
awesome, man.
I would say especially in northern China where no they don't see a lot of foreigners, and this is we're still talking about 2000s, early 2000s. So they still didn't see a lot of people, like all kinds of things at the time. They had like Chinese government decided they want technology, so you stop in those little villages that are barely running water, but there is a computer room that is dusty. There's no whatever, but it has running internet, and I can plan the rest of my trip through. At the time, it was Lonely Planet, and like ask on chats where to go next and all that. And I'm the only one that he actually knows how to use the computer because they put the computer there, but nobody, then they left.
Yeah, yeah.
But there was it. Yes, it was a very unique experience, especially Lhasa and to see Everest Base Camp at the time and all that. But that's what I told you. Like if you wanted to talk mountain biking, but you do need to be very self-sufficient. And I did run into a couple of Dutch, especially Dutch, used to bike long trips at the time. That was on the Spice Road. The whole Western China is a bit of a Wild West, and so that you would see other people. But other than that, it was really solo for
Oh
long
wow.
periods of time.
Yeah, no, you need to write a book, man. That would be a book, and then it'll be turned into a movie. No lie, dude. That like I'm sure the just especially once you start writing, there'll be other memories jogged of like, oh, I totally forgot about this, and I have to speak to more about this.
Yeah.
But uh,
It's
so
funny.
yes,
Digital cameras, this is exactly what digital cameras were born. So I was lucky enough to get a digital camera, one of the first ones. And
oh
it was a
wow.
two megabytes, the pixel, and it sounded like unbelievable. Uh, I was in Beijing, so I actually had like a book for that. But I love it that you want me to write a book in my ample free time. I will
Yeah.
start writing my.
So we will divert back to scuba diving because this is
Yeah,
a scuba diving podcast. But no, that is an absolutely amazing story, and
thank
and
you.
honestly, like maybe I need to start an adventure podcast just so I could hear about more of people's adventures. Yeah, that's actually a good idea right there. But back to the Avelo, you are in Hawaii. You had a hiatus from scuba diving. You got back into it. Why the Avelo? Like, why did you want to create it? What led to that? Like, what? Why did you see the need for it?
Well, there's a dive site in Maui called Mala Wharf, which is a fantastic dive site. It's a collapsed pier that, when you see it from the shore, it looks like not like you won't know that it's a dive site like that. And the walk into it can be a little bit brutal. It's a bit of a longer walk. It's shallow. You can't see where you put your feet sometimes. Sometimes there are some waves. It always throws you off. And there's also like sea urchins and all that. When you get underwater for the first 5 minutes, you don't even understand why you're there because somebody told you about it. But then it opens up and it's just stunning. It looks like you're in Indonesia. There's like schools of fish and tons of turtles and the cleanup turtle. It's beautiful. It's worth the walk. And again, I haven't been in scuba for so long, and the first thing that hits you when you come back is this is still very heavy. Like it's a very cumbersome experience. There's a lot of gear. You need to put it together. You reappreciate the hurdles to get into scuba, and it's especially the putting it together, lifting it from the ground, putting it on your back, and going on. Now I know all of the arguments that if you can't carry it, you shouldn't be doing it. Sure, but it still is. It's one of the things that every diver, when you teach them the open water, we're like, whoa. that thing is heavy. And as I'm walking into the water on a specific dive there, I'm like, wow, wouldn't it be nice to do carbon fiber tanks? Because of course, even then, this was 2016. There were carbon fiber in other uses, and again from my industry, from the environmental, oil and gas, other chemical industries, which now I'm very familiar with. That thing is used everywhere. Paintball, applications that are recreational even,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
are far more demanding. When you think about what paintball is, because it's for kids, it's far more demanding even the scuba, because you don't expect the end user to not abuse it. Of course, they will abuse it. They're kids. So you build it for abuse. And I'm like, dude, carbon fiber will be great, but it's too light. It will not sink. You need to put weight. That doesn't work. And then I remember descending and thinking, well, the only reason we're carrying this thing is because we have this air, and as you breathe through the air, you become lighter. So I need to take extra weight on top. And then in my head, I'm doing the thing. I'm like, okay, there's about 6 pounds of air in there. Then I need at least 6 pounds, but then I need to also overcome all that surface buoyancy. So I'm just carrying more weight on top of more weight. All I'm trying to do is carry 6 pounds of air. That's all I need. I need, like, what's the best way to carry 6 pounds of air so I can have it for a normal dive? Because, and again, at that point, I'm thinking about gases as mass, not as volume of air and all that. Gas should be thought of as mass. By the way, that's how you sell gas, by mass. I'm like 6 pounds of gas. How do I carry 6 pounds of gas without carrying another 70 pounds of gear? And I'm like, if I had a tank that will become smaller while I dive, if it just loses displacement or loses buoyancy, then I don't need to carry all this weight, especially not the extra weight, because for every time that I breathe, I just need the tank to be smaller a little bit.
Yeah.
Like if the pressure vessel itself becomes smaller, the rest of the dive was all in my head. I was with a group, so I couldn't get out of the water, but I was, the rest of the dive. No, it was a fun dive, but it was still with people, and I'm like,
So I do have to say this. I'm like, man, if this is the type of stuff you're thinking on a dive, like I couldn't even imagine where your mind's going outside of a dive. Like you need to be, oh wow, dude, you need to jot everything down on paper. Like, I'd
but
be
I used
like, oh,
to.
look at the fish. There's the fish. That'd be me. So no, that's amazing though. Like that you're coming up with this idea as you dive because you're seeing the need for it, and I absolutely love that. Like as you're going through it, where most people that no that sorry to cut you off, but keep
So,
so
so
you're in
you
the
know how
dive.
you produce. I'll give you a tangent. I know how you do podcast, right? So when I was in school and then early career, when I was developing the chemical company, my wife is like, I went into audiobooks, and my wife one day wanted to listen to the audiobooks that I had because she was driving, and she's like, "This is a physics textbook." I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I'm listening to when I'm mountain bike." She's like, "Are you for real?" I'm like, "I thought you were listening to like whatever." She's like, "How do you get that?" I'm like, "I can see like I actually like when I used to write a lot with like textbooks that were. I went to a library of visually impaired, so they have textbooks that were on. This is early days audiobooks, so I could listen to it. So that yes, when you tell me if this is what I'm thinking when I dive, not usually, but on that dive, I was totally in my head. I'm like, okay, so that should work. What would be the mass? What would it do to the pressure if the tank is compressing? And then I'm like, accumulators. Accumulators can easily do this thing. An accumulator is it's like a shock absorber. You have an inner volume that's variable, surrounded by a hard shell, right? In your car, you have shock absorbers. Airplanes have shock absorbers. Some of those are piston type. So you have a piston inside the shell, and then, the rest of it is oil. Well, if you do that with water instead of oil, it's the same function.
Yeah,
And then I'm like bladder accumulators. A bladder accumulators is exactly what we need. We just need the bladder itself to be inside the accumulator because it's exactly what I just described. It's a tank that can become smaller. In the technical jargon, it would be a variable volume pressure vessel. And again, the thought should be, how do I carry the amount of gas that I need? Just that mass. I don't care if you're doing technical diving or recreational diving. Stop with all this. We have to carry it, has to be heavy. Start to find ways to carry that gas in the lightest package possible so you can do your dive. because it's not about how much of a macho you are. It's about you staying underwater and doing
Yeah,
whatever.
no,
Yeah.
for sure. And I one of the things that like obviously, we're sitting here because of scuba diving. I have a love for scuba diving. You have a love for scuba diving. One of the things I hate, I mean there's a few things obviously, but is the machoism, like the yeah, if you can't carry it then you shouldn't be out there. Like I hate that so much cuz I mean there was at one point I did a refresher, and I think that the woman, she was over 80 years old, and I did a refresher with her, and I was helping her with, get her tank on, like, hey, get in the water, I'll help you put your gear on, things like that. And I was like, just the fact that you're out here, like, she obviously needed a lot of help. Like, she's over 80 years old, and I'm just like, this is absolutely amazing, and that you're out here. I want to see more people be able to do this sort of stuff, and there are ways to do it, but yeah, the whole I call it machismo.
Yeah.
Just it's not a great thing. But so how long was this dive? I mean, this is something it'd probably take me days to think about. You did this in like a
Oh,
45-minute time.
well, one thing leads to another because you're trying to figure out how much of it would work. And so in my head, I'm trying to do some of the math. Now, look, I'm not like a mathematician, so it was more like if I very quickly, here's the thought process. So you're underwater, just imagine this. You're underwater and you're like, yes, there is a better way to carry those 6 pounds of gas. But if I change the volume of the tank, the inner volume of the tank, obviously the pressure is going to go up. So first thought is, wait, do I need to keep the pressure always at 200 bar or 3000 psi? And I'm like, no, no, wait, that's not how it works. It's a mass per mass. All I need to do is I need to, if I breathe 1 gram of mass out, I just need the tank to become smaller by an amount that's equivalent to 1 gram of lift force displacement. So in an accumulator session, what I need to do is 1 gram of mass goes out, 1 milliliter of water goes in. That's through the dive. That's
Yeah,
still we're still on it. And I'm like, yeah, in my head, I'm like, yeah, the pressure is gonna go down just like it does now, except in a smaller progression. Like it won't go down in the same place because you're diving a tiny smaller tank as you go. And then I'm like, okay, that would work. It will change the displacement. Yeah. I wonder how much weight I can cut just based on that. So I'm trying to do some of the math in my head, but I'm like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. And my head is already in that. And then we go out of the water, and the people in the group are like, yeah, did you see the turtle? Did you see the the shark? There's a lot of sharks, and I'm like, nodding my head, of course I've seen. Uh, so we go and
oh,
there's
that's
a little
amazing.
there's a little outdoor shower there, and in that shower, I remember like standing in that outdoor shower and thinking, yeah, that physics is gonna check out. It's gonna check out. Like I'll be able to reduce like at least 12 pounds, which is a lot. I just don't know how far I can take it because I don't know how I can make the shell. Like it will at least 12 pounds because it's the delta between the 6 pounds that you need and the 6 pounds that you're going to consume. I wonder how light I can make a carbon fiber shell that will take that pressure, and we can do that. So then a lot of it was like already like the basics of it were like, yeah, this would work to save weight. But I didn't. This was whole thing. The whole thing was around saving weight. I got home. An Excel sheet did take like a real Excel sheet that goes by the minute. Like you take your sack rate, you figure out how much mess you take out, you take ideal gas law into account. Again, from the chemical engineering perspective, those calculations are not big. You can do it in MATLAB. I chose to do it in Excel because I needed to see every increment. And then I started mimicking dive profiles to see what will happen. Took about 3 days to make sure that the physics really does check out and this would work. And then it was a hobby to go find out who can make that tank, what that would do. I will say at the time, I didn't want electronics at all. I wanted to make a regulator that that was born like 2 days later. That was like, if you can get a regulator, we understand the function right now, right? You understand that there's a tank that you want to make smaller. The way to achieve that is with essentially a bladder inside a very lightweight shell
Yeah,
that you pump water into. So you need a pump now that can deal with that pressure. And again, from working with pumps a lot, that pressure is nothing. Scuba pressure is not high pressure. compared with other industries.
Yes, yes.
Hydraulics go to 20,000 psi, like that's where high pressure is. So pumps can make that, like fracking pumps are going to much higher pressure. So making the pump is not the issue, but how do I stay away from electronics underwater? That was my initial thought, and the way to do that is there's a lot of energy in a scuba tank. When you think about when you compress a tank, you know how much electricity you you use to compress that tank. So you invest a lot of power to compress that gas, but then you never get it out because you never get that anything back from that energy other than your satisfaction of a dive. Because every time you have a demand valve, you open the demand valve, the pressure drops, and then the first stage actually provides density, not even pressure, it provides density to your lungs, and you breathe a high density air enough that your lungs and the ambient pressure will equalize. That's how the regulator works.
Yeah.
But so if you can convert a regulator to be a pneumatic pump, right? A pneumatic pump runs on air. So every time you breathe, that same breath, when the air flows through the regulator, it can do work for you because you have the potential energy in the tank. So if it can do work, it runs like any other pneumatic pump. You don't lose air. It's the air that you breathe will do the work to pump 1 gram of water per 1 gram of air that you're breathing, like clockworks. And then you'll have a perfect neutral buoyancy the whole dive, and you'll be able to cut weight. And it's a simple system. It's essentially a automatic buoyancy control system, lightweight, but with no electronics, and it works consistently throughout the dive. And again, it was a pet project, not a company.
Yeah.
So for a year, I was like playing with this. I got a company to make that regulator, tuned it. It worked. It was great. This is great for anybody in the industry, anybody that's listening to this who has more than 300, 400 dives. For these guys, girls, that is the way to go because it really is magical. Like it's crazy to know how different the diving experience is when you're in space. You don't
Yeah.
even think about buoyancy changes, but it does mean that you start the dive neutrally buoyant for real. And neutral buoyancy is a very misunderstood concept when you see how those systems work, how Avelo works, generally speaking. Neutral buoyancy is when your head is just below water, and when you breathe normally, like you're sitting in a room right now, your buoyancy doesn't change much, or it just changes based on the tidal volume, but you're neutral because you're underwater already. That means that everybody does, but you're not sinking, you're not floating, but you're underwater. To start a dive from that position is good for all of us that are very familiar with water, dove for a while, water people, nothing phases us, we're not anxious, you know, that's great. When you're talking about more recreational diving, even for people who have a lot of experience as a recreational diver, they're not quite attuned to water like a professional is. Because when you're working it actively every day, the way that you look at ocean environments is very different because you really have experienced a lot. So that solution was great for very experienced people.
Yeah.
Active professional, I would say, from a dive master level and above. If you're an active professional, that's great. Experienced recreationals are a different breed in this, and I think you understand what I'm saying and the
Yes. No, I
distinction there.
do. I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really the genesis of transitioning to an electronic system. The people that dove with this, with that early prototype, were like, "Oh my God, this is this changes everything. It changes how we think about scuba. You suddenly start to think about things like mass. Right now, we all live in a world. We standard scuba system divers, and in that I include everything. Anything that has a compressible volume in the form of wing, wraparound vest, CCR, open circuit, name it. All of these have a lot of compressible volume. They're used to one world, one type of a world. Even the early divers that dove a tank that was a fixed tank, they don't dive a wing at all, or a
Yeah.
BCD. Even those have not experienced what you experience when you truly are neutral. You need to see the level of preciseness when I say neutral. This is a different world. That you still live in a, not you, but everybody that dives a BC in any shape or form is still in a world where any sort of depth change is taken into account by anticipation. And in CCR, this is even worse because your anticipation level needs to be there all the time. When you change
Yeah.
depth, you think about it. When you transition to a world that you don't think about it anymore, life is different. Very. It's a very different experience. I think that's what you heard from Anand too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was hard to explain the experience, but all of those the early prototype came out of the water, and like this blows my mind. This is a different experience. It's much different than what I thought. It's not only the weight. To some, as you said, the machismo was like, oh, I don't mind about the weight, but the buoyancy. And it's hard to talk to somebody about buoyancy, especially professionals, because we all believe, look, I've been diving, I've been professional just like everybody else. If you tell me that my neutral buoyancy will be better, my neutral buoyancy is definitely good enough. It's not about that. It's a different experience underwater, because you lose that anticipation and being on guard, consciously, subconsciously, you just lose that. And at that point, I was like, okay, there's too many people coming out of the water with a life-changing experience. And especially for professionals who they not only think about themselves, they always think about the other divers. Even if they don't teach at the time, even if it's just your friends. You always have that bit of a shared responsibility on your mind, no matter what. Even if you dive with professionals, friends, you still have that
Yeah.
that thing on your mind. So I everybody comes out of the water and they're like, this is changing everything because you really don't have that anymore. There's nothing can go wrong with this thing. And then we decided to go electronic because on the electronic version, it's the same thing, except the pump is separate from the breathing mechanism. And then you can jump into the water with a lightweight tank that provides flotation. You don't need to be neutral. You can be positive, and then you pump water into the tank, into the hydro tank. So think about what I just described differently now. You go into the water, and you're now positive. You pump water into the tank just enough to get your head or yourself to be neutrally buoyant. Now, again, things that we don't think about as standard scuba diver. The buoyancy of just your head. What is the buoyancy of just your head? Right?
Oh, I couldn't
So,
answer.
no, I know. So, but those are all things that had to be developed and to think about because it's a different dynamic suddenly. So the head weighs about 10 pounds, a normal head. And when you think about the displacement of it, you say that the delta is actually about 1 kilogram or 1 liter of water. So all you need is to pump 1 liter of water into the hydro tank and you get neutral. And at that point, you point and shoot. You swim to where you want to be. There's no dump and fall because you don't dump air from a BC and just descend like that. You're neutral. You really are neutral. So you just swim to where you want to be. And if you need to stop or you have an ear problem or you have whatever, you just stop. And it's easy. And it doesn't matter if if you have two dives or you have 1,500 dives, when you stop, you stop. The
Yeah.
system, the
No.
system doesn't do anything. So the early days were, then we transitioned into other things. Questions started to come up because you dive with a system that does things that goes against what standard scuba teaches you. For example, Maui can be warm water or cold. Usually the water temperature is, if you do it in metric, it's about 23, 24, or 70. I would say 70. The delta is between 71 in the midst of the winter to 80 summer. So you actually experience wetsuits.
Yeah.
And things that we teach, like, you know, supposedly a wetsuit should compress. Like you should not be able to take a 5 millimeter wetsuit, a large size wetsuit, full body, 5 millimeter. If you told me that you go from the surface to say 30 meters, the buoyancy characteristic of this that we all think about from standard scuba are significant enough that you're like, you definitely need a BCD, right? Yet you do it without a BCD and there's no buoyancy changes. And then you talk to your freediver friends, and they're like, of course there isn't. We would die if there were. Our
Yeah.
lungs, as a freediver, the lungs actually, become smaller. But the wetsuit, why would it happen? And then you go and you talk to the wetsuit manufacturers, and they repeat the same thing. They're like, yeah, you'd be cold. If we sold you a wetsuit that you lose that much volume, you'd be very cold. No, they don't lose that much volume. So as a team, we started taking wetsuits. See, it's not about the system anymore. The system works. But you start to ask yourself, you start to question everything that you learn about scuba because you take wetsuits from every manufacturer. It's winter, it's Maui, and now we're in COVID. So you go to dive shops and you borrow wetsuits from every size, shape, or form. You put it in water, you take the air out, you make sure that there's no air locked inside the wetsuit. You roll it, you put it in a mesh bag, and you put weights on it to see what the buoyancy of the surface. Because it's hard to comprehend that a 7 millimeter wetsuit, a double extra large 7 millimeter wetsuit, it should compress. That's why we have a BCD. That's what we taught students forever. And then you actually do it. You take that wetsuit alone, you roll it, you put it in a mesh bag, so you use it like a lift bag.
Yeah.
Put weights on it, take it down, and you see that it loses a very very small. Of course, it compresses, but it compresses. You lose like 2 pounds of buoyancy, 3 pounds of buoyancy, and that is before that. No, even that was not representative because it's not worn by a body. It's just a loose wetsuit. When it's worn on the body, it actually loses even more buoyancy already. When you're out of the water on a wetsuit, so I had to take it and put it on a PVC pipe just so I can measure the difference because even that didn't check out with the data that we were seeing. It was all like a question of why does this thing work? The weight is easy, that's physics. But how come we can dive to 30 meters, 40 meters with heavy wetsuits, and we don't see the change in buoyancy anywhere near the change in buoyancy that we think we should.
Yeah.
The reason we found this out is because with Avelo, again, you go into the water, you're buoyant. You do one pump cycle. Okay, great. And then you go and you dive, and you're just free. You don't think about buoyancy changes from the surface to wherever it is that you'll go. You go up, you go down, you test it, you go on sites that forces you to go up and down, and there's no buoyancy changes, like you just breathe. Every 30 minutes, you slightly feel a change in buoyancy. You kind of question yourself, maybe I'm a little buoyant right now. And then you run another, what we call a cycle, you run the pump, it stops automatically after a minute, and or it's not. You can stop it yourself if you wanted to. A minute was just a guesstimate for, just so it won't keep running.
Yeah.
So you run it for about a minute, and you're done. You have another 30 minutes of dive time. And the question was, why does this work? How come they don't compress? How come there's no buoyancy changes from heavy wetsuit? Long story short, it ended up later by experimentation. It's actually the BCD itself. See, with the BCD, you have to start the dive 6 pounds negative, right? Because you're going to breathe it.
Yeah.
Now, you can make all kinds of argument that I'm a professional and I'm not breathing the tank to zero and whatnot, right? But from the safety of it, if you needed to give air to another diver, you dive heavy no matter what because you get used to it. You carry weight for other people. You do all kinds of stuff. So anyway, we start the dive negatively because you have to. So when you dump that BCD, the reason why you go down like an elevator is because you have to start the dive negative so you take advantage of it.
Yeah.
But then you're heavy. With us, you start neutral. So the big difference with the BCD is that because you start negative, you pump air into it, right? You need to at least lift 6 pounds at minimum. Well, 6 pounds of lift. If let's do this in kilograms. It's 2.7 kilograms. Let's call it 3 kilograms just to make the math easier
Yeah.
or more. So you have 3 kilograms that you need to lift. 3 kilograms is the equivalent of about 3 Nalgene bottles. If you want a visual of that, that's how much air you have in a BCD. Again, wing, wraparound, whatever. That's how much you have in your BCD. Now you can't see it because it's around you, so it's not visually, until you measure it precisely, it's hard to comprehend how much everybody is doing the same thing. So then, every little depth change at the beginning of the dive especially, will lead to a buoyancy change. That's why we keep thinking about it throughout the day. And all the people that tell you that, but I am so experienced that I never touch my BCD. Do you know how many instructor we asked to have a wrist on their hand and be like, every time you touch that BCD, just make a mark. Let me know. And they come up with numbers like 67, 82. And those are the people that, obviously this is for the development phase. Because again, you ask yourself, standard scuba has rooted in us so many things that are taboo. They are absolutely truth. And then you challenge it when you see that the experience is actually different when you dive with a different system. So wetsuit compression became a real thing. Why do we think that wetsuit compression is even that much? And that's because we keep more air in the BCD than what we think, than what we realize. And that's what causes those changes, not the wetsuit. And the funniest thing was the disconnect between the scuba industry training and the scuba industry manufacturing. Those that
Oh
make
yeah, yeah,
yeah, those that make wetsuits, to them it was obvious. The freediving community, absolutely. Although, and don't, the freedivers will say yes, but we use open cell and you guys use closed cell. I'm talking about both. We
yeah.
did like yeah. So that's where things started to develop into this. What are we teaching here in the standard scuba world? What truths are we teaching? And did we actually check what we are teaching? That's where the Avelo training program came to be because there's too many disconnects, especially when it comes to gas management, thermodynamics, the use of ideal gas law, looking at Archimedes' principle from the mass versus volume that we do now versus density. Archimedes' principle is really a density question, right? You have denser things that sink, and you have less dense things that float. We as a scuba diver, what you want to do is you want to equate your density, you and your system density, to that of water. If you had exactly the same density of water, you'd be neutral, and your
Yeah.
air consumption will go down and all that. And the best way to do it is, as you know, if you have a diver who's not anxious, who's calm, and his breathing rate is very low because he is conscious and he's neutral, obviously the air consumption will be lower, but the density change is going to be very small. In standard scuba, as much as you want to do that, even if you're calm, the moment that you change depth, you change density because and you change it in a fairly large, more than we realize. That's why the diving experience with Avelo is so much different. And as much as we market it as a weight, there are significant weight reduction, but the biggest thing that we are not communicating, because it's very hard to communicate without the experience, is it's not buoyancy control. People's buoyancy is fantastic. Anyway, a lot of professionals, their buoyancy is great. It's not buoyancy. It's a different diving experience. It's a smoother diving experience. I'm going to be careful with this because I want to say carefree. It's not carefree. It's just your mental task load just goes away because it's not needed anymore.
I like that. No, I really do. And so I'll be honest. Definitely, this whole conversation has been very enlightening. Not where I thought it was going to go. It's a lot more in depth on how you're explaining it, on on like the why behind the need for this, and it all is clicking and making sense. I'll be completely honest. So, because that was one of the questions that I wanted to ask is, well, there's a couple different directions I'd like to go, but the question that I'll ask now is, how has the reception been? You know, as far as, so this is out, because you're basically kind of going, like you said, you're changing the way that the scuba industry is. Like you're basically saying, hey, this is how we've been doing it for X amount of years. Here is this new system. How has the reception been? I'm assuming there's obviously, a lot of positive. I'm assuming there's some negative. How has it been on that front?
A bit the same as when scuba generally was introduced in the 50s, where the people who do not dive probably told those early pioneers that they're absolutely insane in going into the water. Like, think about it. Would you, at the early days, Even if Jacques Cousteau himself would have come to you, said, "Hey, I just developed this thing. Want to come swim underwater with me?" Y- yes,
Oh, it's a
that's
radical idea for sure.
oh, absolutely. You're like, and it goes against a lot of the conventions at the time. So we are going against convention at the time that threatens the foundations in many ways of how it's taught. So there's a lot of defensiveness going on without realizing that our development team itself are one of the we are very experienced. And like you're talking about people that were part of it, like Dan Orr. This is not like those are people that essentially were in the industry, in the insurance side of things for 50 years. And when you think about it, we came from the same place, we were also defensive. We were also like, hey, this doesn't make sense. We taught it for so long that we believe it as gospel. Like there's no way that we're going against our own religion here. And so it had to be something that you experiment heavily before you go say a word to the world as a diving instructor. This is a product that was developed primarily by people that came from the training side of things, which was another disconnect to understand that you there is a strong disconnect between scuba diving manufacturing and scuba diving training. And I can give you examples. I don't want to get into that. You asked about the reception. It goes like this. Anyone that tries it, especially from the professional side, comes out of the water. I want to say a convert, and it's the wrong word. I'm not trying to convert them. I'm trying to give them a better experience so they can then go and, because those are the people that will then, you know, populate the world with a better diving experience, a more consistent diving experience above and below water. So everybody that tries it is getting it. But everybody from the outside, before they hear about it, just like you, and by the way, and to all the listeners, just like me, I didn't believe in things that we've seen. It was even worse. I had to be there underwater trying to explain myself, hey, I tried to solve for weight. Why does it make the diving experience so much better? Like, and it's better in the sense that it's better for you, but again, as a professional, as I said, when you take 6 people underwater, or 4, or however big the group is, you're worried about them all the time. All the time. Whether even they are not worried, obviously. You are. You're worried.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether you admit it to yourself or not, there's always something at the back of your head that this group is going to come out of the water the way I put them in the water. They're going to, right? And this is suddenly one of the biggest task load that it reduces for all of us professionals is that because you come when you dive a velo and you have 4 people behind you and you look back and then you swim and you want to show them a small thing, you show them the small thing because they're not going to kick the coral and they're not going to go up. And people are good. Primarily, people are good, and they're good divers too. I don't care how many people are going to argue with this statement. A recreational diver who doesn't dive regularly, and especially when they're not in charge of other people, is not at the same level of caring about the group. They care because they're good buddies, but they will never be at the same level as anybody who's been a professional, active professional for a little bit. So the system is actually for all because it actually resolves that thing that from the safety of the group, everybody is so much more safe and they don't need to worry about ascent, descent, failure points, all that. With Avelo, by the way, if you have a failure, the whole system, like the electronics die, everything dies. Your buoyancy doesn't change. You have 40 minutes to go slowly aboard the dive, do your safety stop, come out of the water. It's such a forgiving diving experience that for the professional it's easy. So when you ask about the reception, it's a very bipolarized reception. If you heard about it, and if you have a bit of engineering background, totally makes sense to you. And then you want to do it. Inside the scuba world, there's a ton of they want to try it, but they want it to be available to them where they are. But those that actually fly to where it exists and try it brings it back with them because you don't go back from this. You don't go back to standard scuba. So
Yeah.
all of them, like this is 100% the experience all over the world now. So the reception is kind of bipolar. On the one hand, there's a lot of scaredness because it goes against so much of the common knowledge in scuba, and people are afraid about failure points and all that. Like, listen, the battery is there for convenience. It's not even. It's not gonna. The system can die. You can have a compromised bladder. The purge valve won't work. Your buoyancy is not going to change because it's not like a BCD. Your buoyancy is going to change by 2 pounds. So you can. It's like giving 2 pounds to a diver at the end of the dive when you didn't weigh them properly at the beginning of the dive or they're a little bit anxious. It's not the 20 pounds buoyancy change or 30 pounds buoyancy change that an inflated BCD can give you. We carry very little weights. So you know how in a standard BC somebody loses a weight pocket. Now go deal with that.
Yeah,
With us,
yeah.
with us again, you don't. In the class, because of all this development time, in the class, again, this is all go back to the reception question. Here's how the reception is. You take anybody, recreational or professional, you put them in the water, dive one, you just show them that the buoyancy changes are not related to depth anymore. You physically do a very large ascent and descent in blue water. And you show them that when you stop them, they stop. There's no thought, there's no anticipation, you just stop. So the first thing that you do in dive one is just get out of the system the idea that buoyancy and depth changes are done. On the second dive, you mimic every failure point known to man on Avelo, and they actually do it as it will be. System doesn't work, electricity dies, water leak, all the water out of the tank. Towards the end of the dive, they remove all the water out of the tank, just to say that the buoyancy change is like minimal. And they can definitely do a safety stop or multiple if they needed to. You do share air, like on the second dive, you do all of the things that you're afraid of. But in terms of reception, until you do those things don't necessarily click.
Yeah.
Once they do, it's great. So, but now we're seeing there's a ton of demand. That's why I'm traveling all the time because the dive shop owners, the industry understood it 2 years ago, and then we started with collaborations with others and all that. To the recreational diver, a lot of the time this is intuitive because they don't need to unlearn things. And to the professional divers, they just come at it from a different angle. It was quite a journey to teach so many professionals and to see the responses. But there will always be this thing that because we're saying something that just sounds so radical, then you have this instant response to say, nah, it can't be true.
I was gonna say, like, so there's a couple things that you said there that resonate with me, and I completely agree with you with from when you have the recreational diver who dives occasionally compared to the professional, or I always even tell people like you should at least get to a rescue certification because it does make you start thinking differently as a diver. And I know there's agencies out there that start that from day one, but I'm speaking agent or industry standard kind of recreational open water courses. And that's why I always ask that question: how was that transitioning from fun dives? Now you're going into the professional side. Now you're in charge of other divers because you never stop thinking that way. Once you pass that threshold, it's always in your
Right.
mind, no matter what. Like it's never.
Yep.
I mean, it is truly a fun dive, but you're always thinking about that other diver, and it goes back to the other thing that you said to where you're speaking about the experience. Like it's hard to explain to somebody the experience until they're actually in it, which brings me back to the bicycle riding when you're sitting solo in just some country that not many people have been. You can't explain that experience to somebody. You actually have to bring them there and let them do it, and then it's like, oh, okay, I got it, like I understand now. But no, I don't even have an engineer background. I mean, I obviously have built things, so I kind of understand from where engineers are coming from. But as far as no engineering background, the way that you're explaining it to me makes complete sense. Obviously, because there's certain things that you just kind of learn in scuba as you're going through your professional career and physics and density and things like that. And it completely makes sense to me. And that's what I'm saying. Like when I said earlier, I didn't where the conversation was going. I was like, oh, I didn't expect this conversation, but it's been very enlightening, and I'm really happy that we sat down and I had a chance to speak to you because it's all making sense right now, right? Because I just from the I don't want to say being on the outside. I'm just like, oh, okay, here's this new thing. I'll be honest, I looked into it. I found out more information when I was at Mighty when you guys were across the booth from me, and I was like, oh, okay, I can actually sit down and explain it. But the way that you're explaining it makes complete sense. And I guess the next question that I'd like to ask is, because you were kind of explaining it a little bit earlier, like somebody that is very experienced in the water, they have, this kind of different mindset when they're in the water. Do you see this going towards like a technical side of it, like deeper dives, mixed gases? Do you have a future in mind for that?
Yeah, this technology lends itself to many things that weren't even envisioned yet in the technical diving world. You said something about not being an engineer. That honestly doesn't matter. The technical side of it is easier to explain. Like if I sit with you and I show you just the numbers, the physics of it will make sense. What wasn't taken into account, and I'll circle back to technical diving, was task load and the relation to air consumption and how much better air consumption can be. And the human factor in this, the mental element in this, wasn't known until you do like 20 Avelo dives. When we record data, that's something that I need to show. That's much more advanced than what I can describe here. But we record, the way that we record the data from the dive is different than how you record data today. Today, because you don't know what the forces that act on you underwater, you don't know if you're slightly negative or slightly positive in today's world. There's no way to capture it. With us, there is, because we know, I can easily tell you how much water is in the tank versus how much air you consumed. So again, once you play a game of mass, I know exactly how neutral you are. Talk to Anand about this because he's just spent a week analyzing his own profile.
Yeah.
What we do is we look at you as a diver and we check your responses on the second. How do you respond to a certain situation underwater, recreational or professional? And I can show you what happens to your air consumption rate with really minor deviation from perfect neutral buoyancy, perfect meaning 0 grams up or down, while you're breathing, how you change your breath, what happens when I ask you to do skills like simple things, equipment removal and replacement, which you'd be like, I've demonstrated it 1,000 times. Let me show you what happens to your air consumption rate, you know, level of confidence and all that. So we have collaborations with entities in the scuba industry. I don't want to get into this too much because we have, those are people that you know. Then, for example, is the one I can talk about. Very interested. We have 12,000 profiles that analyzes data in a way that's very unique. That's where the technical diver has a bit of a. They start to look at open circuit a little differently. Now let's talk about technical diving. This is the first time that underwater you have a compressor. Put aside everything I just talked about, and let's talk about just this, just the concept that you suddenly are diving with a hydraulic compressor on your back. You can suddenly bring the pressure up as you want to. You can control it. It is tied to your buoyancy, but because we're talking about milliliters of water, and you can put them wherever you want, you can suddenly do all kinds of things underwater because you are compressing. Mixed gases, when you tell me mixed gases, today, you can only mix gases above water. I'll stop it there because I don't want to like dive too much into this. But the verticals that it opens, that the technology like this opens for the technical world, has several things. For example, right now, when you're diving side mount, you need to balance, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't just breathe from one. Well, this is a hydro tank now. It's the same Avelo system. All you have is a pump on your back. But once you can choose which tank you put water in, you can breathe from one, balance that one with water, balance meaning buoyancy, and then you move to the other one, or the third one, or the fourth one. You can dive with as many tanks as you want. You only need one jetpack because the amount of gas that you're replacing is the amount of water that you put in. So you suddenly have an open circuit entire ecosystem that was not envisioned before, that you can choose what pressure you want to be, and if you wanted to suddenly blend them to a specific mixture on an open circuit system, without the complications of what happens when you try to blend a loop. Yeah, I can see it in your eyes that you're like looking at me with like, What are you talking about?
No, 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 no.
Yeah.
I'm very, very interested. And to be honest, you said you didn't want to go into it a little bit more. I would love to learn if you can. If you cannot, I completely understand. But no, so this is a direction that you're. Is it in the works, or is it like a direction that you're thinking about going?
I want to go in that direction. The technical world is not, those are very, very smart people, and they want to do their own thing, and I totally respect that. See, technical diving evolved in parallel to the scuba industry. These are people that want to do their own thing and actually are proud to do their own thing. And by the time that the industry will adopt, they look at it as sort of cute. That the industry, like they're always ahead. I'm gonna embrace that. As somebody who developed a system and understand that you don't go by the standard, I actually don't want to go reinvent the wheel for them because it takes, they're part of they have a certain role in the scuba industry. And I actually encourage them to go take this system and go just like they did with standard scuba, right? Nobody thought about side mount in the early days of scuba, right? People did their own thing. I'm bringing to the table a new way of diving that has things that were not done before. I have ideas. I'll develop some, but I'm intentionally leaving. This is bigger than me, and it's bigger than us. It's a shift in how scuba is done, but it does open up options for everybody to do. So there will be things that we will do, but I am inviting the technical community to the table, and I'm doing it openly and always have, because they don't realize sometimes that a back mount high pressure. Remember that our tanks are high pressure. Backmount high pressure system, you got to learn how to use it first. None of those technical divers started with a CCR or whatever. They all started on open water with a back mounted system and then they evolve.
Yeah.
There is a lot of arrogance in thinking that you can just start on that you can go to a new system and just start directly into technical diving. It's not. You actually need to learn how to use this thing as a back mount first, get to know it. And I'm talking to you about we have some very, very technical people. I would say some of them run the uh, technical departments of the known agencies that are now diving Avelo exclusively and are an instructor trainer level for us. They don't talk about it as much, but those are very technical people. And they'll tell you the same thing. Avelo is, in some ways, starting from open water again. Go spend 20, 30 dives on this, then let's talk technical diving.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's nuances that you need to see and understand and all that. And then we'll talk about applications that can be developed for everything that you talked about. Diving with a compressor is a completely different thing. Like just the fact that you can bring pressure to wherever you want and set it. Obviously, there are dynamics that we need to know to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
The,
Yeah.
the way that I would suggest it, if we're talking to technical divers, here's my advice: go do the RAD, which is the recreational velo diver. Put ego aside. It's a new system. Trust me. I also have the ego that I would be like, oh, this should have been whatever. It's not. It's not intuitive. Go do the RAD training. At the end of the RAD training, on every RAD training, they will do dive profile analysis. They will take your dive and they'll show you, it's not a criticism at all. It just shows you where you are neutral relative to your most comfortable breathing range. We actually look at your tidal volume and check that you're not breathing too much. And we are comparing how much time you're spending in the most comfortable breathing range you would be relative to stuff that was done through the dive. And we compare it to your depth and things that happen environmentally. Did we go against the current, with the current? Again, that's something you can talk to Anand about because we teach it in the pro class about how to analyze their profiles. So the dive profile is a big component of this because you suddenly see it in a very different way. You see your physiological responses to your dive in things that you would do normally you wouldn't even take into account. You would completely discount, little changes to buoyancy, little change to kicking and what they do to your air consumption rate. Then go spend 20 dives. Just go do the 20 dives. Then we have a conversation.
Okay. Okay. No, I like it. I like it. And so, last couple, few last, or I should say, few last questions for you. As far as, so you do the training on the Avelo, are you, I don't want to say tied, that's not, are affiliated with any agencies, or is it its own standardized, is it its own training? It's not like a PADI, SSI, TDI. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Or is it affiliated with an agency, or is it its
it's
own thing?
both.
Okay,
It's
okay.
both. We are our own. We first and foremost, we are our own because nobody else knows yet how to teach it at the level that we can because it's completely new. So we are our own. And we're actually doing things, we're piloting programs that are more advanced. We're piloting entry level programs. The red is a specialty. You have to be in open water or whatever. But then we have other programs that will come in. So we are our own. But at the same time, we work with all. You can do your in the NAWI system. You can do everything once you're red certified after your open water. You can go your entire path, both horizontal and vertical, on their courses using the Avelo system. Same with PADI. If you once you're open water certified, you can do your advance. And the others, I will tell you that a lot of the CEOs are red certified now. So we're both. We are our own, but at the same time, we didn't come here to go and step on people's feet. We are here to collaborate on all of this. And what will happen is that we will keep our own programs, and what we'll do is we will keep collaborating with the others so they can teach our programs and they can teach primarily. Our goal is to teach Avelo. At this point, we have no advantage. If you're a technical diver, I'm not going to teach you new technical diving. I will teach you how to use the system because the characteristics of it are different. How you approach diving, how you think about diving, think through the dive. So there's some basic training that needs to happen. And then go learn how to night dive on a velo. No problem.
Okay. Oh, I love it, man. I love it. All right. Well, my last two questions for you. I usually throw out one advice question, but I have to ask this other advice question. So, two advice questions before I let you go. The second to last question is, so somebody that wants to go and start to, basically they want to look at like a solo bike journey, because it's not an easy thing. What is the best piece of advice? Like, maybe is there something that you need, or how to get started on something, like how to even get started? Like, hey, I want to take a bike, ride a bike across the country type journey. What is the best piece of advice you could give to that person?
First of all, depends on your level of biking. Let's start with your level of biking first. If you're not a biker, get a bike, ride without weight for at least 2-3 months in advance. Fix your own bike. Make sure that every time something happens, from a flat tire to throwing the spokes to anything that happens, you fix it. You can take it to the bike shop. Make sure you fix it yourself too. They need to show you. They're usually pretty happy about showing you. Learn everything that there is, anything from a seat post to suspension if you have any, before you even put a load on the bike. The next thing would be make sure that once you get into bike packing, look at the different configurations that are available and start with a one overnight. Just pack yourself for one overnight, go pack in the woods somewhere, come back. Then do 3 days of bike packing just to see how much more weight you're carrying. By the time that if you do a third trip that is like 4 nights, 4 or 5 nights, that's the same as a year and a half.
I love it, dude. I love it. Absolutely love it. Okay. And my last question for you is, I'm a diver. I'm already certified. I want to try the Avelo. I want to go out there and try it. What is the best way to find out information on how to move forward with this?
The website has all of the dive shops that are now Avelo dive shops, and our global reception is fantastic right now. Yeah, I can't tell you how many. We're far behind. We can't keep up with the demand, and we really do need to be selective. So look at the website, look at where it is. Call your dive shop. They typically know where it's coming. If it's coming to the neighborhood, call them. If you get responses that are not, they don't know, it's not, they don't think about it, they don't think it's a thing, don't worry about it. Contact us. Like at that point, contact us. We have people that will respond to you all the time. They'll tell you where it's coming to. And if it's not in your area, it's worth flying to. There's some destinations that are very experienced with it right now. I'll mention a few just so you have it. If you're in the California area, Catalina Diver Supply, Ocean Enterprise. If you want more, dive in the kelp forest, and Catalina Diver Supply is where you should go. If you're in Florida, you have the Keys. We have a network in the Keys or Miami. Bonaire is a fantastic location for us. And now, as you know, we are in the East, and we had an onboarding event with a lot of participants from many different dive shops, all the way from Thailand, Taiwan, Philippines. So we're coming everywhere. If you're a new diver, not even a new diver, if you wanted to experience this, go see on our website where we are. And if it doesn't look like where you are, it's worth sending us an email. Be like, hey, what's the closest to me? Because we know what's in development. We know what will be announced soon. Hopefully soon here we'll be able to have on our website what's coming soon, but it's a bit like mushrooms right now. Like we can't even keep up with where it's going to be next.
I love it, man. Absolutely love it. Well, Aviad, hopefully I pronounced that right. Thank you very much for coming on to the podcast today. This has been absolutely wonderful, insightful. I'm actually very, very curious now myself. I've been meaning to make it out to anti-gravity divers, so I'll have to make it out there and try the new system at some point. Hopefully, I think, yeah, they still have a season. I can't remember what their seasons are, but yes, I will have to try it. And once again, thank you very, very much for coming on to the podcast today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Off-gassing, a scuba podcast.